Thanks, Paul. That's really useful. I now have the pleasure of passing over to Helen.
Thank you so much, Ian and Paul, for inviting me for this very interesting and exciting webinar. A little bit about us. I am Helen Wong, a partner with Charles Russell Speechlys. We have a very long and established working relationship with English and Indian qualified lawyers in our London and Dubai offices, many of whom have lived in India or maintained close ties. So we are very much delighted to be part of this webinar to talk about the issues that will arise in cross-border transactions. Charles Russell Speechlys is a full-service law firm assisting not just in terms of property investment, corporate M&A and listings, but also with the personal elements of immigration, of family law, of tax planning. So with that in mind, what I would love to focus on today is to look at the legal considerations if you are thinking of selling your business, in particular to an overseas investor, and the things that you need to think about. And I'm going to focus on 5 areas, just really quick, because we are, trying to give you an overview as opposed to a kind of deep lecture. And the first one that I would really urge everybody to think about is, what is the structure of the deal? You've seen that Paul and Ian have put a lot of effort into getting a business up to scratch so that it's got the maximum enterprise value to sell. Well, we would want all that hard work to be contained and to be maximized by virtue of making sure that we also understand what is the structure of this deal. There's 2 ways. There's either the asset sale, or there's a share sale. And they are quite different routes, because as shown by the actual title, which gives it away, an asset sale is selling just the assets. And when you're selling the shares, you're selling lock, stock and barrel, everything, the assets and the liabilities. And depending on which route you take will determine the documentation that you will enter into and the kinds of issues that will come up in the transaction. I've put a table there, but I'm not going to focus on that today. I'm going to move on to the next slide, because what I want to do for you as your solicitor is to handhold you, so you don't have to worry about all the legal jargon. I will advise you step by step exactly what things will concern you in this sale. I tell you the truth, you will never have done this before in your whole life. It will be a baptism of fire. You'll be thinking, what's all this documentation? What's all this due diligence? You'll be screaming at me at the end. But I promise you, the reason why it's very important in terms of due diligence is because you as a seller want a clean break. And that's what I'm going to get for you. And the only way we can really get you that clean break, whether you're doing an asset sale or a share sale, is to disclose as much as you can about your business, warts and all. The more you disclose, the more that buyer is on awareness. Okay, so the more they're aware, they can then go after you post-sale to say, hold on a minute, you didn't tell me about this. So how does that all fit in the context of COVID, the pandemic, and what's going on in this world? Because for us as lawyers, what we need to try and do is create some sort of certainty in uncertain times. Whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID, whether it's the next pandemic, we need to prepare you. And even in the best of times, we need to make sure that you can keep that EV value, okay? But one thing's for sure, as a seller, you have to give warranties. So you can ask me, well, what's a warranty, Helen? A warranty is a promise about your business. It's a promise that you've, paid minimum wage, you've registered with the ICO and maintained GDPR and data protection. It could be saying, I've kept the account as best as I can as a true reflection of the business. I've not overinflated it for sale. It's all this kind of good stuff. But because of COVID in particular and the deals that we've been working on recently, buyers naturally have wanted to have far more extensive warranties to protect them. So many companies in the UK have been, under real difficulties and have also benefited from certain grants and furlough schemes from the government. They may also have had rent holidays from the landlord. Now, all that good stuff is great as you're operating a business, but when you're selling, it's quite artificial. You crystallize a date, we sell it, but then, you know, how does everything balance out? Who takes the positives and who takes the negatives? Who takes the risk? So the warranties need to be looked at far more carefully. And as Ian said, you know, making sure that you've got the protection for your IP, making sure that you've got the financial information to, you know, back up everything that's going on and look at the forecast going forward, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. In terms of the employees, this is going to be one of the biggest hot potatoes of a sale process, because that is possibly where the liabilities will lie. Employees can either be the issue where they have a dispute with the business, or it could be to do with you applying for the furlough or the job support scheme and not doing it correctly. That potentially could be a latent problem if it's not documented right. So my job is to make sure all that paperwork is done properly, or if we find any issues, we try to rectify it prior to sale so that it doesn't become an issue. Just like what Paul's doing, looking at a 3-year plan. We know where we want to get to. We see the slight issue at present, and how do we build on that journey? Okay. Now, if we do find an issue, for example, there might be a piece of litigation against the business. And obviously the buyer doesn't want to inherit that and pay out for it, because that, you know, litigation was on your tenure. So naturally, you should bear the risk. In that instance, the buyer may say to you, I want an indemnity. So an indemnity is basically a pound for pound guarantee. If we can quantify that, for example, that piece of litigation is going to be, say, £13,500, which is, you know, just a figure that I plucked out of the air, we can actually say we want that indemnity to be fixed at that figure, so that you know for certain what your liability is going to be. IT and remote working has become pretty prevalent and at the forefront, because as more people work from home, as people are using their own laptops and their own kind of systems, their own Wi-Fi systems, you've got more and more issues with cyber and data security risks, breaches of that. So you as a seller want to make sure you've got procedures in place, not just for your own kind of infrastructure in the office, but also as people have to work from home, as and when the UK is locked down. So we will help you with this due diligence process. You will need to have a cup of tea at the end of it, because it is very, very stressful, but it's done for a reason. Yeah, it's done so that you can get that clean break. And if you don't remember anything at all from this, because it's over your head, you want to go for a clean break. And if I say to you, give me the documents, don't fight with me, just give it to me, because it's for the best. All right. May I have the next slide, please, Sean? So what we're seeing in deals at the moment, typically, if you're going to sell your business, you're going to say, all right, I want £1 million from the business, and you normally get it on completion date. Okay, so you've received the money, they've received, say, the shares, all the assets of your business, and everybody's happy. What we're seeing more now is this split in risk. It's called a deferred consideration or an earnout. So, for example, I'll give you £500,000 on completion, and the other £500,000 will be next year, and that's called the deferred amount. Or some of the buyers are saying, look, I'll give you that £500,000 if you can show me that next year the company has hit this certain target. So that's called an earnout. Now, obviously, you as a seller are thinking, I don't really want to do that. I want all the money on day one. I want to sail off into the sunset and forget about it. The difficulty is, in this particular environment, it's, you know, we are faced with much more challenges. And someone who's saying, I'm going to buy your business on the premise that it's making the same kind of turnover and kind of opportunity, can't quite promise that anymore, because we don't quite know what the future is. So then let's have a think. How do we protect this situation if you were put into this earn-out or deferred consideration point. If you were selling the shares, what we would certainly ask for is a share charge. And that would mean that if the buyer didn't pay you the deferred consideration for those shares, you could then claim back those shares as yours. Okay, so it's almost giving you that guarantee to make sure you get paid. Because, you know, last month we were thinking we're out of COVID. Tomorrow we're going to be in lockdown. What's going to happen next year? So, you know, you need to make sure you protect that deferred consideration if you have been asked for that kind of structure. So you might say to me, well, Helen, how do I protect an earn-out? How can I guarantee my business is going to get there, especially if, for example, I'm no longer at the helm? Okay, this is where the devil is in the detail. This is where we are the drafters. We will make sure we write in that document ways for you to kind of have some sort of control, some manipulation, and some sort of, you know, feasibility to hit that earn-out. Otherwise, you're practically giving away your business, you know, for much less than what Paul has worked very, very hard to get you to. So we would probably say things like, we would want the new buyer to work, you know, in the same kind of methodologies as you do, to actually act in the favor of the business, as opposed to just sit there and wait for the business to tick along. Because you and I know, if you don't work hard, business does not come. It's not on a plate. And Laurie's going to tell us, you know, his stories later. But you got to work really hard for business. So if you don't get a buyer who's the same mindset, it's very important that you kind of put that into the documentation to protect you. And the added layer is, you know, when you're dealing with an overseas purchaser as well, with the best will in the world, there are slight culture differences. You know, there are differences of working, of outlook, of expectations. So that's why the documentation has to, in a way, envisage all feasibilities of issues. And that's what I want to do for you. On to the next slide. When you're selling, we've talked about selling the business, whether it's the assets or the shares. There is also that premise that you operate from. And you may be operating from a freehold property, you could be operating from a lease. Now, typically, you will determine how you want to hold that business, hold that property when you sell. If you are a tenant, which holds a lease, so this the right-hand side of that bit, you will assign that lease over to the purchaser. If you were selling to a UK buyer and they were borrowing money, typically a bank will need a minimum of 15 years on that lease tenure before they draw down the money. So we need to bear that in mind and look at the actual, you know, term that's left on that lease. On the other side, if you're looking at freehold, you have two options. Do you want to sell the freehold to the purchaser, or do you want to keep the freehold and issue a brand new lease? So you have options, and that's how we get involved to help you to structure the transaction, to determine how you want to, you know, move forward. Do you want some income? Do you want to put it into your SIP? You know, we talk with Ian and Paul to determine all that planning. And like I said, if you had a lease and you've had a great landlord who said, look, I'm going to give you a rent holiday, you've got a moratorium until January, but then you've sold your business in December, suddenly, you know, all that rent that you've had the break of 6 months for is now due in January with a new buyer. So things like that, we need to make sure in the document it's reflected fairly, because obviously that was during your tenure, and a buyer would be pretty annoyed if they had to pay all the rent that you had the holiday for. So that's my point on property, and that's a very big part of the transaction, because often, believe it or not, this could be one of the sticking points. And we always, I don't know why, have this struggle with property. I find the corporate element, maybe because I'm biased because I'm a corporate lawyer, but I find the corporate element does go through much more smoothly. But with property, the reason why sometimes things are difficult is because especially with a lease, you could have a third-party landlord who doesn't give a toss about this deal. They have no incentive to help you. They could not give you that extension of the lease, therefore you couldn't assign it over. You know, there's lots of stuff going on. So I always encourage my clients to engage in this particular process with the property right from day one. Okay, and that's my tip for you. May I have the next slide, please, Sean? You'll be pleased to know this is my final slide, and I've kept to time. But I'm going to give you a few predictions as to what I'm seeing in the market, the deals that I'm working on, and what I predict is going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months. I am very busy, so thank God for that. We have still got loads of deals going on. We've got loads of buyers. We're in all different sectors of the market, including the intellectual property space, the healthcare space, education, data centers. These are very, very hot areas for Indian investors. And it's fueled because there is still money flowing in the market. Okay, so as long as bank funding is there will always be a deal. If, you know, the difficulty will be is what is the deposit that's required. So if we look at pre-pandemic, typically people would have to put down 20% to get a funding from bank. The banks are now asking for more deposit. Now, obviously the quality of the buyer that we deal with, for them, it will squeeze their cash flow a bit, but for them it's still doable. The 30 to 40% deposit can be pulled from different streams of income, and therefore that does not hinder the deal flow. It does not hinder the transactions that we've got at present. What they will be looking for is making sure they can buy a company or a business that has sheltered cash flow. So, you know, healthcare, it's always going to be a need. You know, education, the children will always need to be looked after and taught. IP, IT, all that good stuff, data centers, as people work from home more and more. These are very valuable goodwill, very, very valuable cash flows that will continue to be, you know, generated come what may. When we get to normality, whenever that is, I don't know. But I know that Paul and Ian have stress test businesses to the hilt to make sure, if possible, can we get that earn out? And if not, they're going to tell me, redraft that document. Okay? But whatever happens, if you do have to give that earn out or defer consideration, you must get security provisions. And that's the thing that I talked about, you know, the share charge, to make sure that your money is protected. There is absolutely no point you working your socks off for 25 years and selling your business, not knowing you're going to get full market value. And so I echo what Ian and Paul says. You must have a very good, I call it a deal team. They've got to protect you, you know. You've got to go to the experts who do what we do day in, day out. So we know what the issues could be and what the issues will be, so that you can almost like be rest assured. I put that picture there, the hand. Yes, it's shaking hands, but it's also another emphasis to tell you, this process, I will handhold you all the way through, because it is going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult. You will not understand all of it. And I'm not saying that because, you know, to undermine you. I'm just saying it is complicated because you don't do it day in, day out. And what I want to do is to tell you, we will get through this. You will sell your business with the help of Paul, Ian, myself, and we'll do it without jargon. Okay? And so thank you for your time. The next slide. This is the team that I work with. So Rupert Lakar is our partner who heads up the India team with Ruby Dalal. And that we're in different divisions of the firm. So Rupert's in construction, I'm in corporate, and Ruby's in property. So we've got all bases covered. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.